Hi, my name is Elena. After 12 years of marriage, I discovered my health insurance had been canceled while I was in the middle of stage 3 breast cancer treatment. My husband's email simply read, "We need to make financial cuts." I sat in the oncologist's office being told I couldn't continue my scheduled chemotherapy. My phone rang. It was Marissa Dawson from Blue Crest Health Partners, the insurance company that had just abandoned me. "Mrs. Thornfield," she said, "I've been reviewing your case personally. There's something you need to know." That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering how long my husband Philip had been planning to leave me for dead. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. They didn't break me that day, but they came close. Before we dive in, what time are you watching this? And where from? Because what I'm about to tell you might sound like something no spouse would ever do, but mine did. And when the insurance agent called me later that evening, her voice shaking with emotion, well, that changed everything. Let's begin. I sat frozen in the vinyl chair of Dr. Kapoor's office, the thin paper gown crinkling against my skin as I struggled to comprehend what he was saying. The sympathetic tilt of his head made my stomach clench even before his words registered. "I'm afraid there's a problem with your insurance, Elena. It's showing as terminated as of midnight yesterday. We can't administer your treatment until this is resolved." My hand trembled as I reached for my phone, already pulling up the Blue Crest Health Partners app. The red banner across the top confirmed it. Coverage status terminated. Below it, in smaller text, policyholder request, Philip Thornfield. Philip, my husband of 12 years, had canceled my health insurance, while I was in the 3rd month of fighting for my life. "There must be a mistake," I whispered, though the certainty in my chest told me otherwise. The signs had been there. Philip's increasing distance, his irritation at the medical bills piling up on our kitchen counter, his late nights at the office that smelled of unfamiliar perfume when he returned. Dr. Kapoor cleared his throat. "We need to sort this out immediately, Elena. Interrupting your treatment plan at this stage could seriously compromise your progress." I nodded mechanically, already dialing Philip's number. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Insurance showing canceled. Urgent. Call me." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then a single message. "We need to make financial cuts. We'll explain later." Financial cuts. As if my cancer treatment was a luxury expenditure, like our annual trip to the Berkshires or his monthly golf club membership. As if my life was the budget item that needed trimming. Dr. Kapoor's assistant escorted me to a private room where I could make calls. I tried Philip again. Nothing. I called his office at the investment firm where he was a junior partner. His secretary, Vanessa, sounded uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Elena. Philip left for a conference in Phoenix this morning. He won't be back until Thursday." Phoenix, the same city where his college girlfriend Renee had moved after our wedding. Renee, who still liked every one of his social media posts. Renee, whose name he had mentioned in his sleep 2 months ago. I hung up and called Blue Crest Health Partners, navigating their labyrinthine automated system until finally reaching a customer service representative. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thornfield. The policy was terminated yesterday at 4:42 p.m. Eastern Time through our online portal. The request came from the primary policyholder, Philip Thornfield, with all the proper authentication credentials. There's nothing we can do unless he reinstates it." "But I'm in the middle of cancer treatment," I said, my voice breaking. "Stage 3 breast cancer. I have chemotherapy scheduled today." The representative's voice softened. "I understand, and I'm truly sorry. There are some emergency programs that might help, but they take time to process. Let me transfer you to our Special Circumstances Department." After another 20 minutes on hold, I hung up. Dr. Kapoor had already moved on to other patients. His assistant, Melanie, brought me a cup of tea and a sympathetic smile. "We've seen this before," she said gently. "Not often, but it happens. Dr. Kapoor says you can come back tomorrow once you've sorted things out. He doesn't want to delay your treatment." I pulled the sweater I'd worn to the hospital tighter around my shoulders. It was oversized now. I'd lost 18 pounds since diagnosis. The weight loss Philip had always encouraged during our marriage had finally happened, but not the way he'd wanted. Cancer had accomplished what his subtle critiques about my body never could. Outside, autumn leaves swirled across the parking lot of Pinecrest Medical Center. I sat in my car, too numb to cry, watching a family help their elderly mother into the passenger seat of their SUV. The daughter wrapped a scarf around the woman's neck with such tenderness it made my chest ache. My phone buzzed with an email notification. "Philip. Elena. I've been trying to tell you for months that we're drowning in debt. Your treatments have put us $127,000 in the hole even with insurance. I can't do this anymore. I've moved some things out of the house. We'll get the rest later. We need to talk about selling the house. I'm staying with a friend. P. a friend. In Phoenix." With no mention of the fact that stopping my treatment now could be a death sentence. I drove home in a daze, past the coffee shop where Philip and I had our first date, past the elementary school where we'd once talked about sending our future children. Children who never materialized because Philip always had a reason to wait: his career, our finances, the renovation on the Maple Grove house that had stretched from 1 year into 3. The house was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. Philip's weighted blanket was gone from the couch, his favorite whiskey glasses missing from the bar cart, his closet half empty with bare hangers like skeletal reminders of what used to be there. On the kitchen counter, next to the high stack of medical bills, was his wedding ring. I sank to the floor, my back against the refrigerator door covered with souvenir magnets from vacations we'd taken together. Aruba, Montreal, San Francisco. Places where we'd smiled for photos and made love in hotel rooms and pretended we were happy. The sun was setting when my phone rang again. Unknown number. Probably another medical billing department. I almost didn't answer. "Hello?" My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Mrs. Thornfield? Elena? This is Marissa Dawson from Bluecrest Health Partners. I'm a senior case manager. I've been reviewing your file and there's something you need to know." It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world. To us. All right, let's get back to it. Before I found out about the canceled insurance, I thought we were happy. Philip and I met at a charity gala in downtown Meridian Falls 14 years ago. I was working as an event coordinator for the Children's Hospital Foundation. He was there representing his father's investment firm, Thornfield and Associates. He stood out immediately, tall with that confident posture that comes from private schools and sailing lessons, dark hair precisely cut, laughing with just the right amount of restraint at a donor's joke. I wasn't supposed to be his type. My parents were public school teachers from Lakeside who'd scraped together enough for me to attend state college. I wore a dress I'd found on clearance and altered, myself, my curly hair refusing to stay in the updo I'd attempted. But when our eyes met across the silent auction displays, something shifted in the room. "You're not bidding on the Aspen getaway?" he asked, appearing beside me as I studied the weekend ski package I couldn't possibly afford. "Just admiring the photography," I replied. "The light on those mountains is spectacular." He smiled, not the practiced smile he'd been giving donors, but something genuine that reached his eyes. "I've always thought Aspen was overrated. Too many people watching each other instead of the mountains. By the end of the night, we'd snuck away from the gala to a small 24-hour diner where I introduced him to chocolate-covered French fries, and he told me about his secret passion for restoration carpentry, something his father considered working-class nonsense. I fell in love with that version of Philip, the man who seemed excited to find someone who didn't care about his family name or investment portfolio, who quoted poetry and surprised me with wildflowers instead of the expected roses, who said, "My curls were like a Renaissance painting come to life." Our wedding was small by Thornfield standards. Only 120 guests instead of the 300 his mother had initially proposed. We compromised on everything. I accepted the country club venue. He agreed to my college roommate as the vocalist instead of the string quartet his parents preferred. Looking back, I should have seen how his family watched me during the reception, like I was an exotic specimen they were still evaluating for potential defects. "She's certainly spirited," I overheard his mother Vivian telling her sister. During the cocktail hour, eyeing my friends from the hospital foundation who were laughing too loudly by the bar, Philip defended me then. "That's why I love her, Mother. She's real." We bought the house on Maple Grove 3 years into our marriage, a 1920s craftsman with good bones but outdated everything. The renovation became Philip's obsession. He'd come alive in the evenings and weekends, restoring original woodwork and hunting down period-appropriate fixtures. It was the only time he openly defied his father's expectations, and I loved watching him work with his hands, getting sawdust in his meticulously maintained hair. "We'll fill this place with children someday," he'd said, sanding down the banister. "I want them to grow up in a home with history, with character." But the someday for children kept shifting. First, he wanted to finish the renovation. Then he needed to secure his position at the firm. Then the market was unstable. The real reason emerged slowly over wine during our 10th anniversary dinner. "I'm not sure you understand what it costs to raise children properly," he said, swirling his Cabernet. "Private school tuition alone is over $30,000 a year now. Then summer programs, college funds." "My parents raised me properly on teachers' salaries," I countered. His smile was gentle but condescending. "And you're wonderful, Elena. But you know what I mean. Children in our circle have certain expectations." Our circle. By then, I'd learned this meant his parents' friends, his colleagues, the people who mattered to the Thornfield legacy. Not my hospital foundation co-workers or my childhood friends from Lakeside. I compromised again. We'd wait until we were more financially secure. I focused instead on my career, eventually becoming the foundation's development director. The work was meaningful, raising money for children fighting illnesses no family should have to face. I was good at connecting donors to stories that opened both hearts and checkbooks. The irony doesn't escape me now. The diagnosis came without warning 12 years into our marriage. A routine mammogram, a concerned technician, a follow-up ultrasound, then the biopsy, the world-shattering phone call on a Tuesday afternoon while I was preparing notes for a board meeting. Philip seemed appropriately devastated at first. He held me that night as I cycled through terror and disbelief. He went to the first oncology appointment, took detailed notes, asked intelligent questions. Dr. Kapoor was impressed. "You've got a good one," he told me during my initial examination, nodding toward Philip, who was reviewing treatment options on his tablet. But something changed after the second week. The reality of cancer treatment isn't like the inspirational movies with tasteful headscarves and meaningful gazes into the middle distance. It's violent and messy. My body betrayed me in new ways each day. The medication made me nauseated, then the anti-nausea medication made me confused. My skin grew sallow. My hair began falling out in clumps. The bathroom trash can filled with dark curls that Philip had once compared to Renaissance paintings. He stopped coming into the bathroom when I was sick, started sleeping in the guest room so you can rest properly, began scheduling client meetings during my treatment appointments. I told myself he was processing his own grief, that not everyone handles illness well, that he was working extra hours to cover the medical bills our insurance didn't. The expensive Thornfield and Associates plan covered 80% after our deductible, but 20% of cancer treatment is still a staggering number. What I didn't know then was that Philip had been systematically preparing for his exit. The life insurance policy he'd insisted we upgrade 6 months before my diagnosis, which now had a cancer exclusion clause that rendered it worthless for my condition. The separate checking account he'd opened for household renovations that was actually building. His escape fund, the casual suggestion that I reduce my hours at the foundation to focus on healing, cutting my income and financial independence just when I'd need it most. 3 months before he canceled my insurance, Philip attended his college reunion in Phoenix. He returned different, more distant, but somehow energized. I found a receipt for an expensive restaurant in his jacket pocket, dinner for 2 with a $180 bottle of wine. When I asked about it, he mentioned entertaining a potential client. I believed him because I needed to. A week before the insurance cancellation, I discovered a text on his phone when he asked me to find a contact number. It was from Renee. "Counting down the days, you're doing the right thing. Some people aren't meant to survive." I confronted him immediately. "She's talking about her divorce," he explained smoothly. "We've reconnected as friends. She's going through a hard time, and we've been texting. That's all." I chose to believe him then, too. The alternative was too terrible to contemplate while cancer cells were multiplying in my lymph nodes. The last normal moment we had was the night before. I discovered the insurance cancellation. Philip brought home dinner from my favorite Thai restaurant, a rare, thoughtful gesture during those difficult months. He sat with me on the couch and actually watched a full episode of the baking show I'd been escaping into. He even laughed, at the right moments, though his eyes kept checking his phone. "Are we going to be okay?" I asked during a commercial break. He squeezed my hand. "Everything's going to work out exactly as it should." I thought he meant we would get through my cancer, together. Now I understand he was already envisioning his new life, one without medical bills, without a sick wife, without the messy reality of mortality disrupting his carefully curated existence. The next day, I sat in Dr. Kapoor's office, learning my insurance had been terminated, realizing the Thai food had been Philip's version of a last meal, a final kindness before abandonment. As I stood in our kitchen that evening, staring at his wedding ring on the counter, I wondered how someone could share a bed with you for 12 years and still remain a stranger. How the man who once quoted poetry about my hair could leave me when that same hair was falling out from the chemicals keeping me alive. I picked up the ring, feeling its weight in my palm. Solid gold, engraved inside with our wedding date. I thought about flushing it down the toilet in a dramatic gesture of anger. But even in my despair, I recognized its monetary value. Cancer had made me practical about such things. Instead, I placed it in the junk drawer beside the takeout menus and spare batteries, burying it under a tangle of old charging cables. The call from Marissa Dawson at Bluecrest Health Partners was about to change everything, but I didn't know that yet. I only knew that the future I'd planned had vanished, replaced by a terrifying void where even my survival was now in question. "Mrs. Thornfield, my name is Marissa Dawson. I'm a senior case manager at Bluecrest Health Partners." Her voice was professional but had an unusual urgency. "I've been reviewing your file personally after a flag was raised in our system." I leaned against the kitchen counter, emotionally exhausted. "If you're calling about the termination, I already know. My husband canceled the policy." "Yes, that's part of why I'm calling." There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "Mrs. Thornfield, I need to ask you something that might seem strange. Did you know your husband took out a separate insurance policy on you 9 months ago?" The room seemed to tilt slightly. "What? No, I didn't. It's an ancillary policy with significantly enhanced critical illness benefits. It's still active, and it's paid through the end of the year." She lowered her voice. "Mrs. Thornfield, the cancellation of your primary coverage triggered an automatic review of all associated policies. What's unusual is that Mr. Thornfield maintained this secondary policy while canceling your main health coverage." I struggled to process this information. "I don't understand." Why would he? The critical illness policy pays out a substantial lump sum upon verification of specific diagnosis, including stage 3 cancer. Another pause. But it has a mortality rider that increases the payout by 300% in case of death. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Philip hadn't just abandoned me. He'd created a financial incentive for my death. Cancer without treatment would likely kill me, and he'd profit enormously from it. How much? My voice sounded distant, detached. The base payout for your diagnosis is $250,000. With the mortality rider, it would be $750,000. I sank to the kitchen floor, the cold tile pressing against my legs. And he's the beneficiary. Yes, that's correct. My mind raced through the past few months, reinterpreting every action, every suggestion, every thoughtful decision Philip had made. The upgraded life insurance that wouldn't cover my cancer. His insistence that I reduce my work hours. Even the house renovations had stopped abruptly after my diagnosis. Why invest in improvements if he planned to sell once I was gone? Mrs. Thornfield, are you still there? Yes, I whispered. I'm here. I shouldn't be telling you this. Marissa's professional tone faltered slightly. Insurance companies don't normally intervene in domestic situations, but when I saw the pattern, the timing of the new policy, the cancellation of your primary coverage mid-treatment, I couldn't just process it like a normal case. Why are you telling me? Because 5 years ago, my sister was in a situation similar to yours. Her husband made certain insurance arrangements after her diagnosis. She didn't survive. Her voice hardened, and no one warned her. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too filled with memories. Philip and I cooking Sunday brunches, planning dinner parties, arguing over backsplash tiles. Ordinary moments in a marriage I now realized had become a potential death sentence. What can I do? I asked. I have no coverage for my treatments. I have no income. He's left me with nothing. That's not entirely true. Marissa's voice regained its professional composure. The critical illness policy has a living benefits option. As the insured party, you have certain rights, regardless of who pays the premiums. And there's something else you should know. Something about how this policy was structured. For the next 20 minutes, Marissa outlined details that transformed my understanding of my situation. The critical illness policy had been purchased with an uncommon provision, the insured's rights clause that gave me access to the base benefit amount while still living. Philip had either overlooked this detail or assumed I would never discover the policy's existence before it was too late. You need to document everything, Marissa advised. Every communication about the canceled insurance, every financial record you can access. And Mrs. Thornfield? You need to consult an attorney immediately. Today, if possible. After the call ended, I remained on the kitchen floor, staring at the refrigerator covered with souvenir magnets. Each one represented a trip, a memory, a moment when I believed we were building a life together. Had any of it been real? Had he been planning this betrayal all along? Or had my illness simply revealed the true nature of his commitment? I pulled myself up and moved through the house with new awareness. In our home office, Philip's meticulous filing system contained folders for every aspect of our financial life. The insurance section was locked, unusual, since we'd always shared access to these documents. I found the small key in his desk. Drawer, hidden inside an old fountain pen case. Inside the insurance folder was a record of the critical illness policy Marissa had mentioned, along with documentation of our original health insurance. What struck me was the timing. Philip had purchased the critical illness policy just 2 weeks after my first inconclusive mammogram, before we even had confirmation of cancer. He had moved with remarkable speed, as if he'd been waiting for an opportunity. More disturbing was an envelope containing brochures for assisted living facilities in Arizona, all within 20 minutes of Phoenix. Of Renee. Had he been planning to use the insurance money to start a new life with her while I was still struggling through initial tests? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Marissa from Blue Crest. I've sent some documents to your email that you'll need. I've also contacted a colleague at Riverview Legal Aid who specializes in insurance fraud and medical advocacy. Her name is Diane Levinson. She's expecting your call." I hadn't considered legal aid. My instinct would have been to contact one of the corporate firms where Philip's colleagues' wives served on charity boards. But those lawyers golfed with Philip's father. They belonged to his world, not mine. I called Diane Levinson immediately. Her voice was brisk, no nonsense. "Mrs. Thornfield, I understand you're in a medical and financial crisis. I have a cancellation at 4:30 today. Can you come in?" Riverview Legal Aid occupied the third floor of an aging office building downtown, a stark contrast to the gleaming tower where Thornfield and Associates conducted business 10 blocks away. The waiting room had mismatched furniture and outdated magazines, but felt more welcoming than the cold luxury of my in-laws' world. Diane Levinson was a surprise, a woman in her 60s with a shock of silver hair cut in a precise bob, dressed in a vibrant blue suit that defied the stereotype of dowdy public interest lawyers. Her office walls displayed diplomas from Harvard and Yale alongside photos of her with Supreme Court justices. "Before we start," she said as I sank into the chair across from her desk, "I want you to understand something. I left corporate law after 30 years to do this work because I watched too many vulnerable people get crushed by those with power and resources. What your husband has done isn't just morally reprehensible, it potentially crosses into criminal territory." I blinked back tears. Criminal? I thought it was just cruel. Canceling your insurance while maintaining a policy that benefits from your death? Diane shook her head. That creates a direct financial incentive for your demise. At minimum, it's insurance fraud. At worst, it could be interpreted as part of a plan to cause harm. She listened intently as I shared everything. The timeline of my diagnosis, Philip's behavioral changes, the canceled insurance, the revelation from Marissa about the critical illness policy. She took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates and specific communications. "Mrs. Thornfield, Elena, please. Elena." Her expression softened momentarily. "What do you want out of this situation? Besides, obviously, continuing your medical treatment and surviving your cancer." The question caught me off guard. What did I want? For the past 3 months, my entire focus had been on survival. Medical appointments, managing side effects, trying to maintain enough normalcy to keep my job. Philip's betrayal had shattered everything beyond that. I paused, searching for the right words. I want to not be afraid anymore. I want a future that isn't defined by what Philip took from me. I want him to face consequences for what he's done. Diane nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. "Then let's address the immediate concerns first. You need health coverage reinstated immediately for treatment continuity. You need financial resources for living expenses and legal fees. And you need protection from potential further actions by your husband." She outlined a 3-pronged strategy: an emergency petition to the insurance commissioner regarding the suspicious nature of the policy cancellation, immediate action to claim the living benefits from the critical illness policy, and a consultation with the district attorney's office about potential criminal implications. "What about Marissa?" I asked. "Could she get in trouble for telling me about the policy?" "Whistleblower protections should cover her," Diane replied. "Insurance companies have ethical obligations when they identify potentially fraudulent activities. But let's keep her name out of initial filings if possible." As I left Diane's office with a folder of forms to complete and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the next day, I felt something I hadn't experienced since finding Philip's wedding ring on the counter. A spark of determination cutting through the fog of shock and grief. In the parking lot, my phone rang. Dr. Kapoor's office. My heart sank, anticipating another conversation about insurance requirements and postponed treatments. Elena? This is Melanie from Dr. Kapoor's office. We've spoken with your insurance company's patient advocacy department about your situation. There was a note of cautious optimism in her voice. They've initiated an emergency continuity of care provision. Your next 3 treatments are approved while the policy dispute is being resolved. How is that possible? I asked, stunned by this unexpected development. Someone named Marissa Dawson escalated it to their ethics committee. Dr. Kapoor spoke with them directly. Your appointment for tomorrow is confirmed. I sat in my car, overwhelmed by this small victory. For months, I'd been fighting cancer while believing Philip was fighting alongside me. Now I was battling both cancer and Philip's betrayal, but I wasn't alone. Strangers were stepping into the gap he'd left, Marissa risking her professional standing, Diane offering her expertise, even Melanie working behind the scenes to ensure my treatment continued. That night, alone in the house Philip and I had renovated together, I removed our wedding photos from the walls. Each frame held moments I now questioned. Had he ever truly loved me? Or had I simply fit into his plans until something better came along? Until I became a burden? Until cancer made me unprofitable except in death? I placed the photos in a box in the garage, next to holiday decorations we'd collected over 12 years. As I closed the box, my phone chimed with an email notification from Philip Thornfield. Subject: House and Arrangements, Alina. My lawyer will be contacting you about the house. I expect to receive my share of the equity regardless of your current situation. I've calculated that we have approximately $340,000 in equity based on current market valuations. Half is rightfully mine. I've left most of the furniture as it will be easier to start fresh. Please have my remaining personal items packed by the end of the month. I'm disappointed you've been discussing our private matters with my employer's insurance provider. That was unnecessary and unprofessional. Philip, no mention of my health, my treatment, or the fact that he'd removed my insurance coverage while maintaining a policy that would pay him if I died. No acknowledgement that selling the house while I was undergoing cancer treatment would leave me homeless. Just cold calculations and expectations. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to Diane, adding only, "This is what I'm dealing with." Her reply came minutes later. "Perfect. This demonstrates his priorities clearly. Don't respond. We'll address this tomorrow. Try to rest tonight. Your strength should be focused on healing, not him." For the first time since my diagnosis, I took one of the sleeping pills Dr. Kapoor had prescribed. As I drifted off, I thought about Philip's email, so devoid of emotion, so focused on financial transactions. It revealed something I needed to accept. The man I married either never existed or had disappeared so completely that mourning him was pointless. Tomorrow would bring my next round of chemotherapy. It would be brutal, exhausting. But it would also be a step toward survival, not just from cancer, but from the life Philip had constructed around me, the life that had nearly become my elegantly designed tomb. The chemotherapy room at Pinecrest Medical Center was designed to feel less clinical than it was. Recliners instead of beds, warm lighting instead of fluorescents, large windows overlooking a garden where volunteers maintained year-round blooms. But there was no disguising the essential nature of the place. It was a room where poison was administered in the name of healing, where patients sat for hours while toxic chemicals dripped into their veins, hoping the treatment wouldn't kill them before the cancer did. I'd been coming here weekly for 3 months. The nurses knew me by name, knew my veins, knew which anti-nausea medications worked best for my particular reactions. They noticed immediately that I was alone. No Philip. "Today?" Nurse Claire asked as she checked my vitals. She had small, efficient hands and always wore colorful compression socks under her scrubs. Today's featured cartoon otters. "Philip won't be coming anymore," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "We're separating." Claire's expression shifted subtly, not quite surprised, not quite knowing. "I see," she said, adjusting my IV with extra gentleness. "Well, you let us know what you need, honey. We're your chemo family now." Chemo family. The phrase caught in my throat. How had these people I'd known only through illness become more reliable than the man who'd vowed to stand by me in sickness and in health? As the drugs began flowing into my system, I opened the folder Diane had given me. Forms requesting my medical records, financial disclosure declarations, applications for emergency assistance programs, the paperwork of disaster. I worked through them methodically, my handwriting deteriorating as the chemo made my fingers tingle, and my vision blur slightly. Halfway through my session, my phone lit up with a text message from an unfamiliar number. "Elena, this is Renee Blackwell. We need to talk. It's important." I stared at the screen, my heart suddenly pounding harder than the drugs warranted. Renee, Philip's college girlfriend. The woman in Phoenix whose message I'd found on his phone. Some people aren't meant to survive. The woman he'd presumably left me for. What could she possibly have to say that I needed to hear? I showed the message to Claire, who frowned. "You don't need that stress today. Whatever she wants can wait until you're stronger." Claire was right, of course, but curiosity and a strange sense of inevitability made me respond. "I'm in chemotherapy. Now. Can't talk." The reply came immediately. "I know about the insurance policy. Philip doesn't know I know. I'm at the Riverside Cafe near Pinecrest. I can wait until you're done." The Riverside Cafe was less than a block from the medical center, a small local place where patients and hospital staff often grabbed coffee. It seemed Renee had planned this carefully, positioning herself where I would likely pass by after treatment. I showed Claire the message. She pursed her lips. "Want me to call security? Or that lawyer you mentioned?" I considered it briefly. "No. I think I need to hear what she has to say, but..." I hesitated, suddenly aware of my vulnerability. My hair was mostly gone, hidden under a soft knit cap. The chemo had left me pale, 15 pounds lighter than when Philip had last seen me. I didn't want his new girlfriend to see me this way. Diminished, damaged. Claire seemed to understand without my explaining. "Let me see what I can do." She disappeared for a few minutes, returning with Dr. Kapoor's physician assistant, Thomas. "Elena," he said, pulling up a chair beside me. "Claire mentioned you might have a difficult conversation after treatment. I wanted to check if you need any additional support. Sometimes we can adjust your anti-anxiety medication temporarily for stressful situations." The care of these relative strangers compared to Philip's abandonment made my eyes sting with tears. I'm meeting someone who might have information about my husband's actions. I need to be clear-headed. Thomas nodded. "I understand. But please consider having someone with you. After chemo isn't the time to handle emotional confrontations. Alone." "I'll go with her," said a voice from the doorway. I looked up to find Melanie, Dr. Kapoor's assistant, in her lunch break clothes rather than her usual scrubs. "I'm off at 3. I can sit with you, Elena. Just another woman at the next table looking at her phone. I hadn't realized how isolated I'd felt until that moment. "Thank you," I managed. "I'd appreciate that." When my treatment finished, Claire helped me to the bathroom where I splashed water on my face and applied tinted lip balm, a small, defiant act of dignity. Melanie waited in the lobby, casually dressed in jeans and a sweater that revealed colorful tattoos usually hidden by her work attire. "Ready?" she asked, offering her arm for support. The post-chemo weakness had already begun, my legs unsteady beneath me. The Riverside Cafe was busy with the late afternoon crowd. Melanie helped me to a seat near the door, positioning herself at a table nearby with a clear view of the entire space. I scanned the room, realizing I had no idea what Renee looked like now. I'd only seen photos from college, A pretty brunette with a confident smile and the kind of effortless beauty I'd always felt intimidated by. I didn't have to wonder long. A woman approached my table, tall, willowy, expensively dressed in dye, a way that suggested careful curation rather than trendy excess. Her dark hair was cut in a sleek bob, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like she belonged on the charity gala circuit, not in a casual cafe near a medical center. "Elena?" Her voice was lower than I'd expected, with a slight rasp. "I'm Renee." I gestured to the chair across from me. "I don't have much energy today, so whatever you have to say, please be direct." She sat, placing an expensive handbag on the chair beside her. Up close, I could see that her perfect appearance had cracks, slight shadows under her eyes despite careful concealer, a tension in her jaw that suggested she was clenching her teeth. "First, I need to clarify something." She leaned forward, slightly. "I'm not in a relationship with Philip. Not now, not recently." The statement hung between us as I processed it. The text messages, his trip to Phoenix, were about the insurance policy, not an affair. She took a deep breath. "I work for New Life Insurance Underwriting. I'm a risk assessment specialist. Philip approached me 9 months ago about setting up a policy on you." My hands gripped the edge of the table. "You helped him create the policy that would pay if I died?" "No." Her eyes, a striking amber color, held mine steadily. I refused. "I told him it was ethically questionable given the timing. You'd just had your first concerning mammogram. He said it was just precautionary financial planning." She paused. I didn't believe him. Then what was the message about? Some people aren't meant to survive? Renee's expression tightened. "That wasn't about you. It was about my marriage. I was in the process of divorcing my husband, who had become controlling. Philip and I reconnected when he reached out about the insurance. He became someone I could talk to about leaving a difficult situation." She shook her head. "The irony isn't lost on me now." I tried to reconcile this information with what I'd believed. If Renee wasn't involved with Philip, then where was he? Why had he really gone to Phoenix? After I declined to help with the policy, he found someone else at our company who wasn't as careful about asking questions. She opened her handbag and removed a folder. A colleague who processed the application later mentioned it to me, knowing I'd gone to college with Philip. When I saw the terms, especially the mortality rider, I started monitoring the policy. Why? If you weren't involved? Because I've seen this before? Her professional composure cracked slightly. In my work, I've reviewed cases where life insurance became incentive. When I saw how this policy was structured, with the massive payout increase in case of death, alarm bells went off. I thought about what Marissa had said about her sister, about patterns that became visible only to those who knew what to look for. "Did you try to warn me?" Renee looked down. "I should have. I convinced myself it wasn't my place, that I could be misreading the situation. Then last week, I received an alert that Philip had canceled your primary health coverage while maintaining the critical illness policy. That's when I sent that text that you saw. I was angry with myself for not acting sooner. But you weren't. Talking about me surviving. God, no!" She looked genuinely horrified. I was talking about my ex-husband and how I needed to stop protecting his reputation. I was trying to work up the courage to contact you directly. She pushed the folder toward me. "This is everything I have about the policy, including internal communications that shouldn't be shared with clients. It shows that Philip specifically requested information about how quickly death benefits are typically paid out." My vision swam slightly, the post-chemo fatigue intensifying with this new information. "Why are you giving me this? Won't you get in trouble?" "Probably." She gave a small shrug. "But some things matter more than a job. The day after you found my text on his phone, Philip called me, furious. He accused me of interfering. That's when I knew for certain that my suspicions were justified." I glanced toward Melanie, who was watching us intently, ready to intervene if needed. Where is he now? He told me he was staying with a friend in Phoenix. He's not in Phoenix. Renee's expression became grimmer. He's in Meridian Falls, at the Madison Avenue extended stay, with a woman named Vanessa. His secretary. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Vanessa, who had sounded uncomfortable on the phone when I called his office. Vanessa, who had always worked late with Philip. Young, eager Vanessa, who had started at the firm just a year ago. Yes, but there's more. Renee hesitated, then continued. They've been seen meeting with a real estate agent. They're looking at properties. Expensive ones. Properties no one on a secretary's salary or even a junior partner's income could afford without significant additional resources, like a $750,000 insurance payout. Has he filed a claim yet? I asked. No. He can't until... She didn't finish the sentence. Until I was dead. But he's made inquiries about the process, about timeframes. My stomach churned, a combination of chemo side effects and horror. Philip hadn't just abandoned me. He was waiting, planning, expecting the cancer to finish what he'd started by canceling my insurance. I've documented everything, Renee continued. I'm prepared to testify if needed. What he's doing isn't just morally reprehensible, it's potentially criminal. Insurance fraud at minimum. I thought about Diane's words in her office yesterday. At worst, it could be interpreted as part of a plan to cause harm. Melanie approached our table, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Elena, you're getting pale. We should get you home to rest. Renee gathered her things, sliding a business card across the table. My personal number is on the back. Call anytime. And Elena... She paused. I'm so sorry. For not acting sooner. For any part I played in this, however unwittingly. After she left, Melanie helped me to her car. Did you get what you needed? She asked as she adjusted the passenger seat to recline slightly for my comfort. I clutched Renee's folder, adding it to the growing collection of evidence. More than I expected, less than I hoped. What did you hope for? I stared out the window as we pulled away from the hospital complex. I think I hoped there was some explanation that would make this less monstrous, that Philip had left me for someone else and the insurance was just, I don't know, bad timing or oversight? Melanie nodded, understanding. Instead, you found out it was more calculated than you thought. He's waiting for me to die. The words hung in the car, stark and terrible. He's made financial arrangements that depend on my death. He's shopping for real estate with his girlfriend, planning how to spend the money he'll get when I'm gone. We drove in silence for a few blocks before Melanie spoke again. Then you have to disappoint him, don't you? You have to survive. Something shifted inside me at her words. Not hope exactly, but resolve. A determination that had nothing to do with Philip and everything to do with reclaiming my life from both cancer and his betrayal. When we reached my house, Melanie insisted on coming inside. She helped me to the couch, brought water, made sure my anti-nausea medication was within reach. As she was preparing to leave, I caught her hand. Why are you doing this? I asked. You barely know me. She sat on the edge of the coffee table, her tattoos visible as her sleeve pulled back. Intricate designs that I now saw included dates, memorial tattoos. My mother had breast cancer when I was in high school, she said quietly. Stage 4 by the time they found it. My father couldn't handle it. He didn't leave officially, but he was never home, always working late, always had somewhere else to be. She fought alone, except for me. That's why I work in oncology now. She squeezed my hand. No one should have to fight alone. After Melanie left, I lay on the couch, too exhausted to move to the bedroom. Chemo days were always the worst. A special kind of fatigue that seeped into bones, a nausea that came in waves, a brain fog that made even simple thoughts difficult to complete. Despite this, I forced myself to reach for my phone. I needed to update Diane about Renee's revelations, about Philip's real location, about the property shopping that suggested his plans for the insurance money were already in motion. As I typed out an email to her, a text came through from an unknown number. "This is Marissa from Bluecrest. The Ethics Committee has placed a hold on the mortality benefit portion of your critical illness policy pending investigation. Your living benefits claim is being expedited. Funds should be available within 48 hours. 48 hours. I could have money for treatment, for legal fees, for basic survival needs in just 2 days. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a start, a foundation to build from. I fell asleep on the couch with my phone still in my hand, dreaming not of Philip or cancer or betrayal, but oddly, of the house as it had been when we first bought. It, empty of furniture but full of possibility, walls waiting for color, floors ready for life to unfold upon them. In the dream, I walked through the rooms alone, not with sadness, but with a sense of potential. With each doorway I passed through, the house became more mine alone. Philip's presence fading like a photo left too long in sunlight, until only my vision remained. I woke on the couch to the sound of someone knocking at my front door. Disoriented, I checked my phone, 7:45 a.m. I had slept nearly 15 hours, my body demanding recovery after the chemotherapy. The knocking continued, insistent but not aggressive. With effort, I pushed myself upright, wrapping the throw blanket around my shoulders. Through the peephole, I saw Diane Levinson, my legal aid attorney, holding a cardboard tray with 2 coffee cups and a paper bag. "I brought breakfast," she said when I opened the door. "And news. Good news, actually." In my kitchen, Diane moved with surprising efficiency, finding plates for the bagels she'd brought and clearing space at the small table Philip and I had, found at an antique market in our first year of marriage. I'd refinished it myself, sanding away years of neglect to reveal beautiful tiger oak beneath. "You look better than I expected after chemo," Diane observed, passing me a cup of tea. She'd remembered I couldn't tolerate coffee during treatment. "Years of practice hiding how I feel," I said, attempting humor that fell flat. "Corporate fundraising teaches you to smile through anything." Diane's expression softened momentarily. "Well, today you don't have to pretend. I've been working with Marissa from Bluecrest and the Insurance Commissioner's office. The living benefits portion of your critical illness policy has been approved on an emergency basis. The funds will be in your account by noon today." "How much?" I asked, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. $225,000. That's the base benefit minus some administrative adjustments." She pulled out her tablet, opening a spreadsheet. "I've taken the liberty of creating a financial framework for you. This should cover your medical expenses not addressed by the temporary insurance continuation, provide for living expenses during your recovery, and establish a reserve for legal fees if needed." I stared at the numbers, trying to process what this meant. "And Philip can't touch this money?" "Absolutely not. The ethics investigation has completely separated this benefit from the death benefit he would have received. Additionally, the insurance commissioner has frozen the death benefit pending potential fraud charges." Diane looked pleased with herself. "Your husband's plan has effectively imploded." Relief washed through me, followed immediately by a more complicated emotion. This money represented both salvation and the undeniable proof of Philip's betrayal. Every dollar confirmed his calculation, his willingness to profit from my suffering. "There's more," Diane continued, pulling a legal document from her briefcase. "This is a temporary restraining order against Philip. Given the evidence provided by both Marissa and Renee, the judge was convinced there's potential financial abuse that could escalate to other forms." "You think he might hurt me?" The possibility hadn't fully registered until this moment. Diane chose her words carefully. "I think a man who stands to gain $750,000 from your death, who has already taken steps to impede your medical care, and who is making financial plans dependent on your demise, presents a specific type of risk. The restraining order is precautionary, but I believe it's necessary. She slid another document across the table. This is from the district attorney's office. They're opening an investigation into potential insurance fraud based on the documentation we've provided. They'll want to interview you, but not until you're feeling stronger. The systematic dismantling of Philip's plans should have brought satisfaction, but instead, I felt hollow. Will he go to prison? It's possible. Insurance fraud with these specific circumstances, targeting a critically ill spouse, carries significant penalties. But prosecutions can be complicated, and you should prepare yourself for a lengthy process. I nodded, struggling to imagine. Philip, with his tailored suits and country club memberships, in a prison cell. The image wouldn't form properly in my mind. What happens now? I asked. Now you focus on your treatment and recovery. Let me handle the legal aspects. Diane's efficiency was reassuring. I've spoken with a real estate attorney about protecting your interest in the house. Philip's demand for his equity is premature and inappropriate given the circumstances. After Diane left, I showered for the first time since chemo, the hot water working against the bone-deep ache that always followed treatment. I dressed in soft clothes that accommodated my thinning frame and sat at my desk in the small home office. Before my diagnosis, this had been my space for foundation work, a corner of the house where I planned fundraising campaigns and wrote grant proposals. Now it would become command central for reclaiming my life. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The balance that had dwindled to dangerously low levels after Philip's departure now showed a pending deposit of $225,000. The sight made me dizzy, not with relief, though that was certainly present, but with the staggering reality of what it represented. My husband had purchased my life, assigned it a dollar value, and now I was reclaiming that value for myself. I created a new email account, one Philip didn't know about, and began the methodical process of transferring my important communications away from the shared account we'd used throughout our marriage. As I worked, a notification appeared on my phone, a text from Philip. Elena, my attorney tells me you've filed for a restraining order. This is unnecessary and dramatic. I'm simply trying to move forward with my life. The house needs to be sold. Please be reasonable. The familiar tone, dismissive, slightly condescending, positioning me as hysterical while he remained the voice of reason, triggered a wave of clarity. How many times had I adjusted my reality to accommodate his version of events? How often had I doubted my own perceptions when they conflicted with his carefully constructed narrative? I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Diane with a brief note. Documentation as requested. My phone rang almost immediately. Diane, don't engage with him directly. Every communication should go through me from now on. Understood, I said, feeling a weight lift with this simple transfer of responsibility. I have no interest in speaking with him anyway. Good. Oh, and the DA's office called. They've issued subpoenas for Philip's financial records and communications related to the insurance policy. Things are moving quickly. After the call ended, I continued organizing my new digital life. Create new accounts. Update contact information with medical providers. Download financial records. Each task felt like reclaiming a small piece of autonomy. Around noon, I checked my bank account again. The pending deposit was now marked completed. The money was real, accessible. I transferred a portion to a new account at a different bank, creating a financial firewall against any attempts Philip might make to access these funds. My next oncology appointment was scheduled for Friday, just a checkup, not treatment. Dr. Kapoor would want to see how I was recovering from the latest round of chemo, assess whether any adjustments were needed to the protocol. For the first time since my diagnosis, I didn't have to worry about whether insurance would cover the eye visit or if I could afford the copay. The doorbell rang again. Twice in one day after a week of isolation felt almost overwhelming. Through the peephole I saw Claire, the oncology nurse with the otter socks, holding what appeared to be a grocery bag. "Chemo check," she announced brightly when I opened the door. "We do this sometimes with patients who live alone. Just making sure you're hydrated, fed, and taking your meds properly." The simple kindness nearly undid me. "You didn't have to." Of course I didn't have to. I wanted to. She bustled into the kitchen, unpacking containers of homemade soup, electrolyte drinks, and ginger candies known to help with nausea. "Melanie told me about your conversation with that Renee woman. Sounds like you've had one hell of a week on top of chemo." Claire's matter-of-fact acknowledgement of my situation was strangely comforting. No tiptoeing, no excessive sympathy, just practical support and genuine concern. "The money came through," I told her as she arranged the soup containers in my refrigerator. "From the insurance policy, I can pay for treatment now." "Well, thank God for small mercies," she said. "And for whistleblowers like your Marissa. Not everyone in the insurance business is a soulless robot." She paused, studying my face. "You're processing a lot, aren't you? Not just cancer, not just your husband's betrayal, but all of it together." I nodded, unable to articulate the tangle of emotions. Relief about the money, rage about Philip's calculated betrayal, fear about both cancer and his potential retaliation. Grief for the marriage I thought I had, determination to survive despite everything. "One day at a time is bullshit advice," Claire said unexpectedly. "When I had breast cancer 5 years ago, that's right, I've been where you are, people kept telling me that. One day at a time. But some days are too overwhelming to take all at once." She touched my arm gently. "Sometimes it's 1 hour at a time. Sometimes it's just the next breath." "How did you get through it?" I asked. "By accepting help when it was offered. By being angry when I needed to be angry and scared when I needed to be scared. By understanding that surviving cancer isn't just about the medical treatment, it's about protecting your spirit through the process." She gestured around the house. "And by changing what I could control when so much was beyond my control." After Claire left, I walked through each room of the house with new awareness. Every space contained memories of my life with Philip, design choices we'd made together, objects that carried emotional weight. The living room where we'd hosted dinner, parties for his colleagues. The guest room where his mother stayed during her twice-yearly visits. The master bathroom he'd insisted on renovating to match the one in a luxury hotel we'd visited in Chicago. In our bedroom, his presence lingered most strongly, his side of the closet now half empty, but still bearing the organizational system he'd insisted upon. His nightstand with the single book he'd been reading before he left. I opened his nightstand drawer, not entirely sure what I was looking for. Inside was an assortment of forgotten items: reading glasses, loose change, business cards, a half-empty pack of mints. Beneath these was a small notebook I didn't recognize, leather-bound, expensive. I hesitated, then opened it. The pages contained handwritten notes in Philip's precise script. Dates, phone numbers, calculations. As I flipped through, certain entries caught my attention. E's diagnosis confirmed, stage 3. Discuss treatment options with Dr. K. Expensive, but insurance should cover 80%. Need to research additional coverage options. Met with NL rep, not. R. Discussed critical illness, plus mortality rider. Premium high but potential return makes it worthwhile. Processing time for claims AVG, 45-60 days. E started chemo. Side effects severe. Prognosis unclear, but Dr. K mentioned 65% 5-year survival rate without complications. Too long to wait? The clinical nature of these notes, the cold calculations, the implicit frustration with my potential survival, they confirmed what I'd already learned from Marissa and Renee. But seeing it in Philip's own handwriting, evidence that he'd been methodically planning while sitting beside me in doctor's appointments, was still shocking. The final entry was dated just 3 days before he canceled my insurance. V agrees Phoenix plan makes most sense. Found property in Scottsdale. 1.2 M but can make offer of $950K with expected funds. Need to accelerate timeline. Ease treatment showing positive response. Can't risk remission. V. Vanessa, his secretary. The Phoenix plan had nothing to do with Renee and everything to do with starting a new life with his mistress, funded by my death benefit. I placed the notebook carefully in a plastic bag, potential evidence for the DA's investigation, and sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, overcome not with sadness but with a clarifying anger. This house, which had once represented our shared future, now felt contaminated by Philip's betrayal. The renovation projects we'd completed together, which I had once seen as expressions of our partnership, now revealed themselves as investments he'd made in a property he ultimately planned to sell after my conveniently insurance-funded death. I couldn't stay here. Not in these rooms where he had watched me sleeping, perhaps calculating how long I might live and how to profit from my death. Not in this bed where he had lain beside me while writing notes about accelerating the timeline. I pulled out my phone and texted Diane. I need to sell the house, not because Philip wants his equity, but because I can't heal here. Can we discuss options? Her response came quickly. Absolutely. This is your decision to make, not his demand to dictate. Let's talk tomorrow about how to proceed on your terms, not his. On my terms. 3 simple words that represented a seismic shift in my thinking. For years, I had adjusted my desires, my needs, my very perception of reality to accommodate Philip's preferences. Now, for the first time, I had the resources and support to make decisions based solely on what I needed to survive. Not just cancer, but the aftermath of his betrayal. I began packing a bag, just essentials for a few days. I couldn't continue sleeping in this house, not with the knowledge I now possessed. I needed neutral space, a temporary sanctuary where neither cancer nor Philip dominated the environment. As I carefully selected comfortable clothes, medications, and the few personal items that predated my marriage, I felt a strange lightness. Not happiness, I was still far from that, but a sense of possibility that had been absent since my diagnosis. Each item I chose to take represented a conscious decision about what I needed to move forward. Tomorrow would bring more medical appointments, legal consultations, and difficult decisions. But tonight I would sleep somewhere untainted by Philip's calculations and betrayal. Tonight would be the first night of my new life, a life he had tried to end but had inadvertently helped me reclaim. I chose a small extended stay hotel in a neighboring town, not luxurious, but clean and quiet, with a kitchenette and separate bedroom. The anonymity was comforting after months of being the cancer patient to medical staff and poor Elena to acquaintances who had heard about my diagnosis. Here, I was just another guest, my private battles invisible to those around me. 3 weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments, legal meetings, and incremental recovery. The restraining order against Philip remained in place, reinforced, after Diane presented his notebook to the district attorney. The investigation into insurance fraud had expanded to include his financial activities at Thornfield and Associates, where irregularities had been discovered in client accounts he managed. My temporary insurance continuation became permanent through a special intervention by the insurance commissioner's office, prompted by Marissa's whistleblower testimony. The critical illness funds secured my immediate financial stability, allowing me to focus entirely on treatment and recovery. Dr. Kapoor was cautiously optimistic about my response to chemotherapy. The tumor has reduced by approximately 40% since we began treatment, he explained during my latest assessment. Your body is fighting impressively, Elena. And if we continue on this protocol? I asked, still bracing myself for worst-case scenarios despite the good news. I see no reason why we shouldn't achieve significant remission. He smiled, the expression reaching his eyes. In fact, I'd like to begin discussing post-treatment planning. Radiation therapy, certainly, but also restoration, physical therapy, nutritional support, potentially reconstructive options if you're interested. Restoration. The word resonated deeply. Not just of my body, but of my life, my sense of self, my future. As I left the medical center that afternoon, I realized I had begun thinking beyond survival for the first time since my diagnosis. Not long-term plans, not yet, but possibilities. Small, tentative imaginings of a life reclaimed. My phone rang as I reached my car. Diane's number. "Elena, are you sitting down?" Her voice had an unusual edge of excitement. "I'm about to drive. What's happening?" "The DA's office just called. They've charged Philip with multiple counts of insurance fraud, attempted wire fraud, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The complaint has been filed, and an arrest warrant has been issued." I leaned against my car, suddenly unsteady. Arrested? When? "They're executing the warrant this afternoon. They believe he's still at the Madison Avenue extended stay with..." "Vanessa." There was a pause. "Are you okay with this? I know it's a lot to process." Was I okay with it? The question seemed both essential and irrelevant. The legal machinery had been set in motion weeks ago when we provided evidence of Philip's actions. That it had reached this point, actual criminal charges, an arrest warrant, felt surreal, but inevitable. "Yes," I said finally. "I'm okay. With him facing consequences, I'm just processing." "That's understandable. There will likely be media coverage once the arrest happens. The DA mentioned that financial crimes targeting seriously ill spouses are unfortunately becoming more common. They want to make an example of this case. An example. My private tragedy transformed into a public morality tale. What should I do?" I asked, seeking concrete direction in the swirl of emotions. "Nothing right now. Stay at your hotel. Keep your appointments. Let the legal system do its work." Diane's voice softened slightly. "And maybe prepare yourself for some attention you didn't ask for." After the call ended, I sat in my car for several minutes, watching patients and medical staff move through the parking lot, each person carrying their own invisible burdens, each fighting private battles. Soon, aspects of my battle would become public knowledge. Local woman betrayed by husband during cancer treatment. The headline practically wrote itself. Rather than driving back to the hotel, I found myself heading toward Riverview Park, a quiet green space along the water where Philip and I had sometimes walked on Sunday afternoons. Not because I sought memories of him, but because I needed space to think beneath open sky. The park was nearly empty on this weekday afternoon. I followed the riverside path slowly, my body still recovering from the most recent round of chemotherapy, but growing stronger. Each week, the water moved steadily beside me, unconcerned with human dramas, following its ancient patterns toward the sea. My phone buzzed with a news alert. It had begun. Meridian Falls investment manager arrested for fraud scheme. Targeting ill spouse. The end. Article included Philip's professional headshot from the Thornfield & Associates website, smiling confidently in an expensive suit, the very image of trustworthiness. The dissonance between that image and the man who had calculated the financial benefits of my death made me dizzy. I sat on a bench overlooking the river, forcing myself to read the entire article. The details were clinical, focusing on the financial aspects of the alleged crimes rather than the personal betrayal at their core. Philip was described as a junior partner at a prestigious investment firm who had allegedly engaged in a complex scheme to profit from his wife's terminal illness. Terminal. The word caught in my throat. My illness wasn't terminal. Difficult, serious, life-threatening without treatment, but not a death sentence. Yet Philip had proceeded as if my death were not just possible, but inevitable, desirable, Even. As I sat absorbing this new reality, a text message appeared from an unknown number. Elena, this is Vivian Thornfield. I've just heard the news about Philip. We need to speak immediately. This must be a terrible misunderstanding. Philip's mother. Of course she would reach out now when family reputation was at stake. During my 3 months of treatment, she had called exactly twice. Brief, perfunctory conversations that focused more on how Philip was handling the stress than on my well-being. I didn't respond. Whatever relationship we had existed only through Philip, and that connection had been severed. Her concern now seemed more about damage control than genuine care for either of us. Minutes later, another text arrived, this one from Melanie at Dr. Kapoor's office. Just saw the news. We're all thinking of you. Dr. K says to remind you that stress management is part of your treatment plan. Let us know if you need anything, even just a safe place to sit for a while. The contrast between these messages, one demanding attention, to family reputation, one offering genuine support, crystallized something I had been slowly recognizing over these difficult months. My true connections weren't defined by legal ties or family obligations, but by authentic care and mutual respect. I drove back to the hotel, increasingly aware of my phone lighting up with notifications, news alerts, text messages from acquaintances who had seen the story, even an email from my former supervisor at the hospital foundation expressing shock and support. In my hotel room, I turned off my phone and sat by the window, watching the sky change colors as afternoon faded toward evening. I had anticipated feeling vindicated when Philip's actions became public, when he faced consequences for what he had done. Instead, I felt a complicated mixture of relief, sadness, and something unexpected: freedom. The arrest, the charges, the public revelation, these created a definitive ending to our story. There would be no reconciliation, no chance that the last few months had been a terrible misunderstanding. Philip had made calculations about my life and death, had actively taken steps that prioritized financial gain over my survival. These were now matters of public record, facts that couldn't be rewritten or denied. When I finally turned my phone back on, there was a voicemail from Diane. Elena, Philip has been arraigned. Bail was set at $500,000. His father posted it immediately, but the conditions include surrendering his passport and remaining in the state. The Thornfield family has hired Preston Davis as defense counsel. He's expensive, but not particularly creative. They've issued a statement claiming misunderstanding of insurance protocols rather than malicious intent. Standard approach. Call me when you're ready to discuss next steps. Next steps. The legal process would continue without requiring much from me. Evidence had been gathered, charges filed, procedures set in motion. My focus could remain where it belonged: on treatment, on healing, on rebuilding. The following morning, I had an appointment with a real estate agent Diane had recommended, someone experienced in handling property sales during divorce proceedings. The house on Maple Grove needed to be sold, but on my terms, not as a panicked response to Philip's demands. Catherine Lynn met me at a coffee shop near my hotel, her efficiency immediately apparent in her organization and preparation. I've reviewed the property records, recent comparable sales in the neighborhood, and the current market conditions, she said, sliding a folder across the table. Based on the renovations you've described and the desirability of the location, I believe we can list significantly above what your husband estimated. I opened the folder to find a comprehensive market analysis suggesting a listing price nearly $100,000 higher than Philip's valuation. The craftsmanship in those original features you preserved adds significant value, Catherine explained, especially to buyers looking for authentic craftsman details. And the kitchen renovation you completed last year hits exactly what current buyers want. How quickly could we sell? I asked. In this market? With proper staging and marketing, I'd expect multiple offers within the first week. But Elena, she hesitated. May I offer a perspective? Sometimes after trauma, and I'd categorize both cancer and what your husband did as significant traumas. Immediate decisions can be reactions rather than reflections of what you truly want. I considered her words. You think I might regret selling the house? I think you should be certain you're selling because you want to move forward, not because you're running from painful associations. Her directness was refreshing. The house itself did nothing wrong. The renovations you described sound like they were largely your vision, your work. That's worth considering. No one had suggested I might keep the house. From the moment Philip left, the assumption, his, Diane's, mine, had been that selling was inevitable. The idea of reclaiming the space rather than abandoning it hadn't occurred to me. What would that look like? I asked. Financially, I mean, if I wanted to keep the house. Catherine pulled out a calculator and a notepad. Your equity is roughly $340,000 based on current market value. Assuming the mortgage is joint, you'd need to refinance in your name only and buy out your husband's share, approximately $170,000, plus any associated legal costs. The amount was substantial but not impossible, especially with the insurance, funds. And the thought of Philip receiving his share of our home's value still rankled. He had contributed financially, certainly, but I had been the one who researched historically appropriate renovation techniques, who spent weekends stripping, decades of paint from woodwork, who created the garden that increased our property value. I need to think about this, I told Catherine. It's a bigger decision than I realized. She nodded approvingly. That's exactly the right approach. I'll prepare the listing materials so we're ready if you decide to sell, but take your time. This should be a choice, not a reaction. As we parted, she added one more thought. Houses can be cleansed of negative energies, you know. New paint, new arrangements, new memories. Sometimes reclaiming a space is more powerful than abandoning it. I carried this perspective with me to my next appointment, a consultation with Dr. Lydia Montenegro, the psychiatrist Dr. Kapoor had recommended for help processing the psychological impact of both cancer and Philip's betrayal. Dr. Montenegro's office was nothing like the sterile medical environments I'd become accustomed to. Warm colors, comfortable furniture, plants thriving in the natural light from large windows. The space itself felt therapeutic. Elena, she greeted me, her voice carrying the slight accent of her native Argentina. Thank you for coming. I've reviewed the notes Dr. Kapoor sent over, but I'd like to hear in your own words what brings you here today. Where to begin? With the cancer diagnosis that had revealed the true nature of my marriage? With the insurance policy designed to profit from my death? With the arrest that had transformed private betrayal into public scandal? I'm trying to determine what to keep and what to leave behind, I said finally. Not just physically, my house, my possessions, but emotionally. How much of my past shapes my future? How do I separate what was real from what was illusion in my marriage? How do I trust my own perceptions again after being so completely deceived? Dr. Montenegro nodded thoughtfully. Those are profound questions, especially when confronted simultaneously with a health crisis and a betrayal of this magnitude. Perhaps we might start with a more fundamental question. What do you know with certainty about yourself that remains true despite everything that has happened? The question caught me off guard. In recent months, I had defined myself primarily through what had happened to me: cancer patient, betrayed wife, insurance fraud victim. The idea that core aspects of my identity remained unchanged beneath these external circumstances felt both obvious and revolutionary. I know that I value authenticity, I began slowly. I know that I find meaning in preserving beautiful things, in recognizing the worth of what others might discard. I know that I'm stronger than I believed myself to be. As these certainties emerged, something settled within me. A foundation upon which recovery might be built, not just from cancer or betrayal, but toward a future defined by my own values, rather than external circumstances or others' expectations. These knowing are an excellent place to begin, Dr. Montenegro said. They provide orientation when everything else seems uncertain. In our work together, we'll continue identifying these certainties and using them as touchstones for the decisions ahead. I left her office feeling unexpectedly lighter. The path forward remained complex, filled with both medical and legal challenges, but I had begun to recognize that beneath the identities imposed by circumstances, patient, victim, ex-wife, my essential self remained intact. On the drive back to the hotel, I took a detour past the house on Maple Grove. I parked across the street, studying the craftsman details that had first attracted us to the property. The distinctive porch, columns, the multi-paned windows, the river rock foundation that had stood firm for over a century. Catherine's words echoed in my mind. The house itself did nothing wrong. Was it possible to reclaim this space? To transform it from the site of betrayal to a sanctuary for healing? As I sat contemplating this possibility, a text message arrived from Marissa at Bluecrest. Thought you should know. Philip tried to file a claim on the policy today, claiming your condition had significantly worsened. Our legal department shut it down immediately and has reported this attempt to the DA's office as additional evidence of fraud. You're well protected now, Elena. Focus on getting better. The audacity was breathtaking. Even after arrest, even after public exposure, Philip was still trying to profit from my illness, still betting on my death rather than my recovery. In that moment, sitting outside the house we had shared, I made two decisions. I would survive, not just cancer, but everything that had followed it. And I would keep the house, not because of its connection to Philip, but despite it. I would reclaim it as my own, a physical manifestation of my ability to recognize value where others saw only potential profit, to restore what had been damaged, to create beauty from what remained. 1 year later, I stood in my garden, feeling the late spring sunshine warm my shoulders as I planted tomato seedlings along the newly built raised beds. My hands, no longer weakened by chemotherapy, worked the soil with confidence, tucking each fragile plant into its new home with a whispered encouragement. You're going to do just fine, I told them, patting the earth around their stems. So much growing ahead of you. The garden had become my personal metaphor, a space where destruction preceded creation, where what appeared dead could regenerate with proper care, where patience yielded unexpected beauty. When I decided to keep the house on Maple Grove, the overgrown backyard was the first space I reclaimed, transforming it from a showcase of Philip's meticulous but sterile landscaping into a vibrant, productive sanctuary. In the kitchen window overlooking my work, a small prism hung, casting rainbow patterns across the garden beds. Dr. Montenegro had suggested this simple addition during a session 6 months ago. In many traditions, she had explained, light represents truth revealed. Place something that divides light into its component colors in a space that feels significant to you. A reminder that what appears singular and simple often contains multitudes. The chimes of my doorbell interrupted my gardening meditation. I wiped my hands on my jeans and made my way through the house. My house now, in both legal deed and emotional reality. Diane Levinson stood on my porch, professionally dressed, as always, but with the slight softening of formality that had developed during our months of working together. In her hand was a thick manila envelope. It's official, she said, offering the envelope with a small smile. The divorce is finalized, the property settlement approved, and most significantly, the release of claims has been signed. I invited her in, leading the way to my dining room where we had spent so many hours reviewing documents and preparing for court appearances. The tiger oak table was now surrounded by different chairs than when Philip lived here. Mismatched vintage pieces I'd found at estate sales and refinished myself, each with character and history. The release of claims was the final piece, I asked, opening the envelope to examine the documents. Yes. Given the criminal proceedings, Philip was in no position to contest anything, but his father still tried to negotiate. Diane shook her head slightly, professional restraint barely containing her disdain. Fortunately, the Thornfield family ultimately recognized that a clean, complete separation was in everyone's best interest. The release of claims meant that Philip formally relinquished any rights to future financial claims against me. Important protection given the civil lawsuits he now faced from clients whose accounts had shown irregularities during his management. And the criminal case? I asked, though I knew the answer. I had attended each court date, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom, neither hiding nor drawing attention. Sentencing is scheduled for next month. Based on similar cases and his plea agreement, we can expect 7 to 10 years, with potential reduction for good behavior. Diane studied my face. How do you feel about that? The question had layered meanings. How did I feel about Philip going to prison? About the public spectacle our private tragedy had become? About the years of my life invested in a relationship built on calculation rather than love? I considered my words carefully. That justice isn't the same as healing, but it creates space for healing to occur. I don't need him to suffer. I just needed the truth acknowledged. Diane nodded, understanding the distinction. And your health? Dr. Kapoor mentioned your latest scans were promising. No evidence of disease, I confirmed, still cautious about using the word remission, despite Dr. Kapoor's increasing optimism. I'll be on hormone therapy for years, and the surgical scars are still healing, but medically speaking, things are steadily improving. After Diane left with her typical efficiency, other clients needed her sharp mind and protective instincts. I returned to my garden. The legal milestone deserved acknowledgement, but there was something grounding about continuing the physical work of planting, of literally putting down roots. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Marissa Dawson, who had transitioned from insurance whistleblower to friend over these complicated months. Heard the divorce was finalized today. Celebration dinner at Riverside Cafe? Claire and Melanie are in. The support network that had formed around me remained one of the unexpected gifts of this difficult journey. Marissa had left Bluecrest Health Partners after providing testimony that led to industry-wide investigations of similar insurance schemes. She now worked for a patient advocacy organization, helping others navigate the complex intersection of serious illness and financial systems. Claire, my oncology nurse with the colorful compression socks, had become a regular presence in my life, first checking on me professionally, then helping with household tasks during my weakest periods, eventually joining me for coffee or walks as my strength returned. Melanie from Dr. Copper's office completed our unlikely circle, bringing her straightforward compassion and the perspective of someone who had watched her own mother face similar challenges. "Count me in," I texted back. 6:30? I'll be the one, with dirt under her fingernails. I resumed planting, reflecting on how different my life looked now compared to 18 months ago. The cancer diagnosis that had seemed like an ending had instead catalyzed a painful but necessary transformation. Philip's betrayal, horrific as it was, had ultimately freed me from a marriage that had slowly diminished my sense of self. The previous week, I had returned to work, not to the hospital foundation where memories of fundraising galas with Philip still lingered, but to the Historic Preservation Commission, where my knowledge of architectural restoration and my personal experience with reclaiming damaged spaces found perfect application. The position paid less than my previous role, but offered something more valuable: alignment with my core values, the opportunity to protect and celebrate what others might dismiss as outdated or irrelevant. As I planted the final tomato seedling, my neighbor Sarah appeared at the garden gate, her 7-year-old daughter Emma in tow. "We brought you something," Emma announced, carefully carrying a small clay pot. "It's a cutting from our jasmine. Mom says it will grow up your trellis if you plant it in the right spot." I invited them into the garden, accepting Emma's gift with appropriate ceremony. "This is perfect. I've been wondering what to grow along the eastern fence. Jasmine will thrive there." Sarah smiled, watching her daughter solemnly explain the plant's care requirements. "Emma has been checking every day to see if you were in the garden. She's decided she wants to be a plant doctor now." "A botanist," Emma corrected with the seriousness only children can muster. "Or maybe a regular doctor too, like the ones who helped Ms. Elena get better." The simple acknowledgement of my illness and recovery from this child struck me deeply. Throughout my treatment, I had been conscious of hiding the harder moments, of maintaining a public facade that minimized others' discomfort with my suffering. Emma's matter-of-fact reference felt refreshingly honest. The doctors helped, I agreed, but so did having good neighbors and a garden to come home to. After Sarah and Emma left, I found the perfect spot for the jasmine cutting, creating a small, protected space for it to establish roots before climbing the trellis. Another metaphor, perhaps too obvious but no less meaningful for its simplicity: new growth, support structures, patience for blossoming. Inside the house, I showered away the garden soil and prepared for dinner with my unexpected circle of friends. The home itself had transformed over the past year, room by room, into a space that reflected only my aesthetic and needs. Walls that had once displayed Philip's carefully selected investment art now featured local artists' work and photographs I'd taken during architectural preservation projects. The formal living room had become a combined library and music space, with bookshelves Diane's son had helped me build, and the piano I'd always wanted, but Philip had dismissed as impractical. Even my bedroom, the space most haunted by memories of Philip calculating my death while lying beside me, had been completely reimagined. Now it was a sanctuary of calm colors and natural materials, the bed positioned to catch morning light, the walls adorned with framed botanical prints I'd found at the university library's annual sale. As I dressed for dinner, I caught sight of myself in the mirror, still thinner than before cancer, my hair now a short silver pixie cut rather than the long curls Philip had once claimed to adore. The physical changes were significant, but somehow less important than the internal transformation, they reflected. I looked like myself, but a more distilled version, clearer about who I was and what mattered. At the Riverside Cafe, Marissa, Claire, and Melanie had secured our favorite corner table. They greeted me with the relaxed warmth of friends who had seen each other through difficulty and emerged on the other side. No excessive sympathy, no walking on eggshells, just genuine connection. "To finality," Marissa toasted, raising her glass, "and new beginnings." "To women who stand by women," Claire added. "To cancer in the rearview mirror," Melanie contributed. Raised my own glass, taking in these three faces that had become so important in my reconfigured life. "To unexpected families," I said, "the ones we find when we most need them." As our conversation flowed through dinner, I found myself participating fully, no longer conserving energy or filtering my thoughts as I had for so many years with Philip. The freedom to be authentically present, to express opinions without calculation, to laugh without restraint. These simple human interactions had become precious through their absence and reclamation. Halfway through the meal, my phone rang, not with Philip's number, which I had blocked months ago, but with an unfamiliar local area code. "Go ahead," Claire encouraged. "We'll guard your dessert." Stepping outside, I answered to find Renee Blackwell on the line, Philip's college girlfriend turned unexpected ally. "Elena, I hope I'm not interrupting anything," she began. "I just received word that the Insurance Commission is implementing new regulations directly resulting from your case. They're calling it the Thornfield Rule internally. Additional scrutiny for policies with mortality riders taken out shortly after medical diagnoses." I leaned against the building, absorbing this information. "That's significant." "It's your legacy," Renee said. "Your willingness to make this public, to endure the exposure and scrutiny. It's going to protect other people in vulnerable situations. I thought you should know. After we ended the call, I remained outside for a moment, watching the river flow past the cafe's patio. The Thornfield Rule. Not a legacy I would have chosen, certainly, but there was profound meaning in knowing that my experience might prevent others from facing similar betrayal. When I rejoined my friends, they looked at me expectantly. "Good news?" Melanie asked. "Different news," I replied, sharing Renee's update. Apparently, my disaster has become a cautionary tale for the insurance industry. Marissa reached across the table to squeeze my hand. That's how change happens, one protected person at a time. As our evening concluded and we parted with plans to meet again the following week, I walked alone to my car, no longer fearful of darkness or solitude. The night air carried the scent of early summer flowers, and somewhere nearby, a pianist practiced with a window open, Chopin nocturnes floating across the parking lot. I drove home to Maple Grove, to my reclaimed house with its newly planted garden and rainbow-casting prism. The path that had brought me here was not one I would have chosen, marked by illness, betrayal, and painful revelations. Yet standing, now on the other side of that journey, I recognized that survival itself was just the beginning, the foundation upon which a more authentic life could be constructed. Inside, I moved through rooms that had witnessed both my diminishment and my reclamation. I touched objects that carried history, some painful, some precious, all part of the complex tapestry that had become my life. The house that Philip had once imagined selling after my death had instead become the physical manifestation of my continued existence, my refusal to be erased. In the kitchen, I placed my keys in the small ceramic dish I'd made during art therapy sessions with Dr. Montenegro. Its imperfect shape and uneven glaze represented my first creative act after treatment, clumsy but authentic, functional despite its flaws. The junk drawer where I had once placed Philip's abandoned wedding ring now contained seeds for next season's garden, packets carefully labeled in my handwriting. The drawer's transformation from repository of painful evidence to storage for future growth seemed almost too perfect a metaphor, yet it was simply the reality of reclaiming space inch by inch, object by object. My phone chimed with a final text. Message for the evening. Dr. Copper confirming my follow-up appointment for the following week. A routine check now rather than the urgent evaluations of active treatment. Looking forward to hearing about the garden, he added, having taken genuine interest in my restoration projects, both architectural and personal. I responded with a quick photo of the newly planted beds, adding, growing stronger every day, both the plants and the gardener. As I prepared for sleep in my transformed bedroom, I reflected on the parallel journeys of the past 18 months, the medical path from diagnosis through treatment toward healing, and the personal path, from betrayal through truth toward reconstruction. Neither journey had reached its endpoint. Both would require continued vigilance and care. But the acute crisis of each had passed, leaving space for something new to emerge. The insurance money that Philip had intended to collect upon my death had instead funded my rebirth. The house he had planned to sell had become my sanctuary. The life he had calculated would end had instead been distilled to its essence, stronger and more authentic than before. I had not just survived cancer and betrayal. I had discovered that survival itself was merely the first step toward a life reclaimed on my own terms, a life where pain became purpose, where damage transformed into beauty, where what had been broken could be restored with patience, wisdom, and the unexpected kindness of both strangers and friends. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, medical follow-ups, professional responsibilities, the ongoing legal proceedings that would eventually fade from public interest. But tonight, in this house that had witnessed both my near destruction and my reconstruction, I rested in the certainty that whatever came next, I would face it as myself, whole, authentic, and undiminished. Coming up next, you'll see two more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.